You won't believe what happened when I returned to my hometown to inherit my grandfather's ranch. The peace I expected turned into chaos, thanks to the HOA's most entitled Karen. She tried to claim my land as hers, but by the end, she was paying me rent. Here's how it all went down. You won't believe what happened when I came back to my small hometown after years away. 4 years, I had been chasing dreams in the city, working long hours, living in small apartments, and telling myself that one day I'd come back home. But life has a way of throwing surprises at you. One day, I got the heartbreaking call. My grandfather, the man who practically raised me, had passed away. I was devastated. He was more than family. He was my role model, a man who taught me the value of hard work and the pride of owning land. In the middle of my grief, though, came a shocking piece of news. My grandfather had left me something incredible. His ranch, the one I spent summers playing on as a kid. It wasn't just land, it was history. Acres of open space, an old barn full of memories, and the kind of peace you can't buy in the city. It sat right on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, the same one I remembered riding my bike through years ago. To me, it felt like a second chance. I packed my bags, loaded up my truck, and drove home, ready to start fresh, reconnect with my roots, and honor his memory by taking care of the land he loved. But the moment I rolled into town, it became clear that not everyone shared my excitement. You see, neighborhoods change, and mine had changed a lot. Somewhere along the way, a homeowners association had taken over the area next to my ranch. And at the head of it was a woman everyone whispered about, the so-called Karen of the HOA. I hadn't even set foot on my grandfather's porch before I saw her. She was standing there, arms crossed tight against her chest, lips pursed like she had swallowed a lemon, eyes scanning me like I was a criminal trespassing on her property. The way she stood there, it was almost as if she had been waiting for me to arrive. And then came the words that flipped my whole world upside down. She glared at me and said, "This land is ours now. The HOA doesn't allow people like you to just move in and disrupt things." At first, I laughed, thinking it was a bad joke. How could this stranger possibly believe she owned the ranch my grandfather had worked his whole life to build? But no, she wasn't joking. She was dead serious. In her mind, she thought she controlled my family's land. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't going to be the peaceful homecoming I had imagined. This was the beginning of a war. Karen wasted no time in making her move. The very next morning, I walked out to the front gate and froze. There, taped in big bold letters, was a notice that read, "Violation of HOA rules. Remove unapproved property." I stood there in disbelief, staring at the paper fluttering in the wind. And when I looked closer, I nearly laughed out loud. She was calling my grandfather's old barn, an iconic structure that had stood tall for over 50 years, an unapproved property. This wasn't just insulting, it was absurd. That barn wasn't just wood and nails. It was a piece of my family's history. My grandfather had built it with his own hands, and I had spent countless summers climbing its beams, hiding in the hayloft, and helping him stack tools inside. To see it labeled as if it were some cheap shed I had thrown up overnight? That cut deep. Determined to sort this out peacefully, I decided to pay Karen a visit. I figured if I explained everything, she'd understand that she had no authority over my land. So, I walked up to her house, rehearsing polite words in my head. But the moment she opened the door, all my hopes of a civil conversation vanished. Before I could even greet her, she exploded like a storm. She started shouting about community standards and preserving property values. She sneered at my grandfather, calling him old-fashioned, and claiming he never respected the modern rules of the neighborhood. I was stunned. This was the man who had lived here longer than anyone, the man who had taken care of his land while others were still figuring out how to plant flowers in their front yards. And here she was, trying to erase his legacy with her rules and regulations. Then she crossed the line. Karen insisted that if I wanted to stay, I would have to start paying HOA fees. She acted as if I was some outsider squatting on her property, when in reality, I was the rightful owner of land that had never been part of her HOA in the first place. I calmly explained the truth. My land wasn't under HOA control, not then and not ever. But Karen didn't care about facts. She barked orders, waved her hands like a dictator, and finally slammed the door in my face. Within hours, she had rallied her little group of HOA loyalists, whispering lies about me and plotting ways to make my life miserable. That was the moment it hit me. This fight wasn't about barns, fences, or even money. No, this was about power. Karen wasn't trying to protect the neighborhood. She was trying to control me, and she was willing to go to war to do it. Karen didn't waste a single second trying to make my life miserable. For the next few weeks, it felt like I was trapped in a full-blown neighborhood war. Every morning I woke up wondering what new stunt she had pulled this time. And believe me, she had a whole arsenal of tricks. First, she started with bogus fines. One day, I found another notice shoved under my door, this time claiming I owed $500 for property violations. Property violations? On land that didn't even belong to her HOA? It was laughable, but she was dead serious. She even mailed me letters stamped with the HOA's logo, trying to make it look official. Then came the tow truck incident. I had parked my grandfather's old pickup in the driveway, the same spot it had always sat in, when suddenly a tow truck appeared out of nowhere. I rushed outside just in time to stop them from hauling it away. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, smirking like she had won. I confronted the driver, showed him my deed, and told him the HOA had no jurisdiction here. Embarrassed, he left. But the damage was done. Karen had made it clear she wasn't going to stop. Her boldest move came when she decided to physically block me from using my own barn. One morning, I found her shiny SUV parked right in front of the barn doors, angled so that I couldn't open them even an inch. When I asked her to move it, she gave me that smug look and said, "The barn is an eyesore. Consider this a community service." I could feel my blood boiling, but I knew better than to lose my temper. While Karen was busy plotting and harassing me, I was quietly preparing my counterattack. I spent hours digging through old property records, deeds, and maps that my grandfather had meticulously kept. I also hired a lawyer, just to make sure every detail was airtight. And that's when I found the bombshell. Not only was my ranch completely outside the HOA's control, but a portion of her backyard actually sat on land that legally belonged to my grandfather, and now to me. I couldn't believe it. The woman who had been tormenting me, trying to drive me off my own property, had been living partly on my land all along. The irony was almost too perfect. So, the next time Karen came stomping over, shouting about some new violation, I was ready. Calmly, I pulled out the documents and handed them to her. As her eyes scanned the papers, I saw her confidence drain away. She stammered, This can't be right." But it was right. I had the proof. In that moment, the war shifted. Karen realized she wasn't the queen of this neighborhood anymore. In fact, she was standing on ground that belonged to me. And for the first time since I returned, I finally felt like the one in control. From the moment Karen realized part of her precious backyard actually belonged to me, the balance of power shifted. The queen bee of the HOA, the woman who had been barking orders and threatening me since the day I arrived, was suddenly powerless. And I wasn't about to waste this opportunity. I didn't want to be cruel. Believe it or not, I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted peace. So, I decided to handle it fairly. I sat down with my lawyer and drafted a proposal. Karen had two options. She could pay me a small monthly rent for the portion of her property sitting on my land, or she could move her fences back and lose almost half of her backyard. When I delivered the papers to her, she exploded. She practically ripped them out of my hands, scanned the contents, and then screamed so loudly I'm pretty sure the entire neighborhood heard. "I will not pay rent on my property," she yelled, her face turning bright red. But I stood firm and reminded her that it wasn't her property. The records didn't lie. Karen didn't take the news quietly. At the next HOA meeting, she tried to rally the neighbors against me. She called me a conman, a scammer, and even claimed I had forged the documents. But the funny thing is, people were starting to see through her. She had bullied everyone at some point, fining them for tiny things like leaving a trash can out too long or painting their mailbox the wrong shade of white. For years, they had tolerated her antics because she had authority. But now they realized her power was crumbling. Instead of siding with her, neighbors began approaching me privately, thanking me for standing up to her. One man even admitted he had been fined for hanging Christmas lights too early one year, while another woman said Karen once threatened to sue her for planting the wrong type of flowers. Little by little, the neighborhood stopped seeing Karen as their leader and started seeing her for what she really was, a bully with too much time on her hands. Meanwhile, Karen tried to make my life even harder. She sent me threatening emails, blasted me on community social media pages, and even had the nerve to confront me in the middle of the street, shouting that I was ruining everything. But the more she raged, the more ridiculous she looked. People were tired of the drama, and for the first time, she didn't have their support. I knew then that the tables had truly turned. Karen wasn't the one calling the shots anymore, I was. She could scream, stomp, and threaten all she wanted, but the law and the land were on my side. And deep down, she knew it. In the end, Karen had no choice but to face the truth. All her yelling, scheming, and desperate attempts to intimidate me couldn't change the cold, hard facts written in black and white. The land was mine, and she was the one who had been trespassing all along. For weeks she dragged her feet, trying everything to avoid the inevitable. She filed complaints, accused me of harassment, and even threatened to take this to the mayor. But none of it mattered. My lawyer was calm, confident, and absolutely certain of our case. Eventually, the pressure cracked her iron facade. One afternoon, I got the call I had been waiting for. Karen had finally signed the rental agreement. That's right, the same woman who once told me I didn't belong here was now legally paying me rent just to keep part of her precious backyard. The irony was almost too sweet to believe. From that moment on, the neighborhood dynamic shifted completely. Karen's voice at HOA meetings grew quieter and quieter. The woman who once strutted around like she owned the place now avoided eye contact with the very neighbors she used to boss around. Some people even joked that I should start attending HOA meetings myself, just to see how far she'd fall when she had to sit across from her new landlord. For me, the victory wasn't just about winning against Karen, it was about reclaiming the peace my grandfather had left behind. I spent the next few months restoring the ranch. I patched up the old barn, planted vegetables in the garden, and even set up a swing on the big oak tree where I used to play as a kid. Every evening, I'd sit on the porch and watch the sun dip below the horizon, feeling more connected to my grandfather than ever. And every time I saw that little rent check arrive in the mailbox, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't about the money, it was about the reminder that justice had been served. The woman who tried to take everything from me now had to answer to me. The neighbors, once fearful of Karen, started visiting me instead. We shared stories, laughed about her past antics, and slowly the neighborhood began to feel like a community again, something it hadn't been for years under Karen's reign of terror. In the end, Karen's downfall wasn't caused by me alone, it was caused by her own arrogance. She thought she could bully her way into controlling land that never belonged to her. But as my grandfather used to say, the truth always comes out, no matter how deep you try to bury it. And in this case, the truth didn't just come out, it handed me the ultimate victory. Karen went from queen of the HOA to the tenant of the very man she tried to drive away. And me. I got the last laugh, the piece of my inherited land, and a story that proves one thing: karma never misses.